Welcome to another episode of the Wheels and Beyond podcast. I am your host, Ben Durham, and we have Michel here today from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And he lives in the neighborhood of Elmwood with his wife and 3 children and writes about infrastructure and municipal finance at dearwinnipeg.com. He's been invited to speak in cities across North America, and his writing has been featured extensively online and in print, including on Strong Towns, Streets Blog USA, CBC, and Winnipeg Free Press. And La Liberté, how do you pronounce that?
Liberté.
La Liberté.
Yes,
he is
perfect.
the author of You'll Pay for This, which is coming out soon, and you'll hear more about that at the end of the episode. It's about how we can afford a great city for everyone. Forever. It's a fun book demystifying municipal finance for citizens, local media, and municipal councils everywhere. So, now that you know who Michel is, let's dive in.
That was top notch. Top notch.
Let's start off with the number one thing that you would want people to know, even if they were to click away from this episode in the first few minutes of listening.
Wow, that's such a good question. Man. Yeah, no, if there's one takeaway is that as the co-owner of your city, which is what you are, you're not a customer of your city, you're a co-owner of it. As the co-owner, it's your responsibility to understand how it's doing financially. And it's important because how your city is doing financially is sort of the connective tissue about all the other things you care about. So whether that's transportation or pools or parks or trees or sewage, like whatever you're interested in, municipal finance is kind of like that connective tissue that brings it all together.
Well, yeah, no, everyone lives in a community, whether it's a smaller town or a medium-sized city, like here in fake London, London, Ontario, or in a large city, Toronto, New York, etc. And that's interesting. Yeah, we're not customers. We're all co-owners.
Yeah, we're all co-owners. And it doesn't matter how big or how small your town is. It matters because municipalities or cities, they touch our everyday lives, right? They're the order of government. They deal with clean drinking water. They deal with, you put your garbage out and it gets picked up magically. All the stuff that is like invisible when it works well, but when it doesn't work well, then you totally notice it, right? So it's a super important order of government. It touches your everyday life, and it needs to be able to do that forever. And so in order to do that, you need to know whether the finances are in order. Because if your city goes bankrupt, it's going to have impacts beyond just your city. It's going to impact your day-to-day life. If your city can no longer afford to pick up your garbage, or make sure you have clean drinking water, or make sure that when you flush the toilet, it goes where it's supposed to go. Like, that's a big deal, and you're going to notice it right away. So it's super important.
And going off of that, even if none of what you just said is like, oh, it's fine, I don't need to be able to flush the toilet,
exactly.
Which would be ridiculous.
Yeah.
When you realize that you might be in a decaying city and you go to sell, your property is now not going to do so hot on the market.
Exactly.
Or even
once you're in a declining city, property values start to go down. If people start to move away, it gets harder and harder for you to maintain value in any investment that you've made in your property, in your home, in your business, in your whatever it is that you're invested into your community. All of that is directly impacted as well. So it matters.
And I guess as there's even more flight from the city, then property taxes have to go up because, I'm sure we'll get into
fewer people to
sort
share
of
the load. Of course. Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm just not sure if a lot of people think about that. And so
I'm sure I can guarantee you most people do not think about it. It takes a strange kind of weirdo to think about it every day like I do.
And now I have caught that bug, and I've been thinking of this endlessly. We show up at council and we're like the YIMBYs being like, yes, densification in our neighborhood, please.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is once you start to understand it, you totally see the connection everywhere. You understand how it relates to bike lanes, how it relates to transit, how it relates to infill or greenfield development, or how it relates to street trees, how it relates to, X, Y, and Z, everything that's in there. It's all connected and you can see it. It's almost like seeing through the matrix, right? Like you can, once you see it through the financial lens, all of a sudden everything is like, there's a lot of stuff that becomes very obviously a mistake and other stuff that's very obviously a net positive, and then a bunch of other stuff that you really have to dig into, like get to an answer. So yeah.
So right before we get into the story of how you became who you are, because I would love to know how that happened and like your mobility journey there, and how you get around and all of those. I wanted to ask. It's funny. I knew about like 3 minutes ago what I was going to ask, and
then I talked for so long.
Oh, right. No. That was good. Okay, I do remember the other day a street light went out, and I actually really do like this. I've mentioned it a few times on other videos and everything, but service.london.ca for us is like the portal for just being able to report issues, a pothole, a sidewalk problem, or a non-plowed thingamabob, or in this case, a streetlight. Does Winnipeg happen to have that? Because those are, it's super useful.
Yeah, we have like a 311 service where it's like your one-stop shop for accessing or, talking to the city and reporting, a pothole or a down street sign or, a street light that's out or something like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So that's a call, or?
It's a call. They also have an online form, and they used to have an email, but I think they're trying to phase that out because they were having a hard time keeping up with all the emails because there's a lot of emails coming in.
Yeah, for sure. I make sure to make sure the neighborhood is in good order because, the city staff can't be everywhere all the time. Mm-hmm. So it's a great way.
Precisely,
Perfect. So now with that out of the way, would you mind sharing a little bit about how you got to where you are? Like, when did this start piquing your interest? What was that? Was it a gradual shift into learning about municipal finances and everything else? Or
there's always it's gradual until one point where you're like, oh man, how long have I been doing this? Right. And I mean, it started initially like where I first was noticing things is when the community center up the street from my house closed down. So that would have been like 2007, I think. So they had closed it because they didn't have money for it. And I was like, well, that's unfortunate. But it didn't that was when I look back on it was the catalyst. But, in the moment, I didn't really feel changed or anything. It was just like, that's interesting. Because, I was always like, well, why isn't there money for this? Like, clearly, like this community center has been here since for decades and decades and decades. Like, hasn't anybody planned for this? And so it was, the answer that always came back is always, it's a matter of priorities. We just got to prioritize our city's money. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, if you have enough money for everything, then you don't need to prioritize. You just do it. If you're prioritizing, it's because you don't have enough money for everything. And so that, to me, that was like a kind of a realization of like, well, why don't we have enough money for everything? Like, this doesn't make sense to me. And so, over the course of a couple of years, I started reading on some stuff. I started trying to dig into, city budgets, and I've been an entrepreneur all my life. So I had already had some financial know-how, knew how to read financial statements. But like the city's financial statements are like, I don't know, like hundreds of pages long, right? And they touch on everything from like street cleaning to infrastructure to sewage to like, where do you even start, right? Like if you're trying to find out why don't we have enough money, it was just this impossible thing. But it, over time I got sort of introduced to Strongtown's ideas, and I was like, right. And then I knew where to look. And when I went back and I looked, I'm like, oh yeah, this is 100% it. We've built way more than we can afford to ever maintain. And that's why everything's falling apart. So that was kind of like a slow journey. Fast forward even a little bit more to 2018, which was an election year in Winnipeg. And so we were electing a new council, but at the same time we were having a referendum or a plebiscite vote. There was a question on the ballot about opening up Portage and Maine. Portage and Maine is like the premier downtown intersection in Winnipeg. Most famous intersection, but almost also famously or infamously, it is the only intersection in the city where pedestrians are not allowed to cross. And it's been the case since 1979. So what? A long time ago. Yeah, they closed it in 79 as part of like a big deal with some massive developers who were going to build a tower and they were going to build an underground concourse. But to to force people into the concourse. They like closed the above ground crossings. So it had been closed for like 40 plus years. Basically,
Hold up. I have to inquire here further.
Yeah.
You're not allowed as a pedestrian to cross at an intersection?
Yeah, correct. And downtown, at the heart of downtown, there's no crossing.
I've never heard of.
Oh yeah, and it was like concrete barriers, right? So it's not even like there's just like a sign that says "Please don't cross." It's like there's no way to cross, right? In the heart of our downtown, there was no way to cross the street at our most famous intersection. And so we were having a vote on whether to open that back up to pedestrian crossings. This was 2018. And so to me, having followed municipal finance, having, gotten into, all of that, urbanism stuff that entails and all that big rabbit hole, to me, it was like, oh, this is a no-brainer. Like, of course we need to open this up to pedestrians. This is like a smart financial decision for the city. We have to do this. Both short-term and long-term. It was no-brainer. So anyways, the vote came and went, and it was a resounding no, 65% to 35%. And to me, that was like oh, wow. Like how we were talking earlier, like people don't think about this kind of municipal finance kind of stuff. Yeah, they don't. Like this is the kind of stuff they don't think about. And so to me, it was like kind of that realization moment that like, oh, wow. Like at least 65% of people in Winnipeg like don't really think about this and don't really understand why this would be a net positive and why we actually have to do it given our current financial situation. So that was kind of the point where I was like, I'm going to take it upon myself to try to educate my co-citizens. And so that was the birth of Dear Winnipeg, where I just decided I'm going to start writing about municipal finance, infrastructure, all of those topics that of course I talk about planning, and I talk about active transportation and transit and all of that stuff as well, because it all ties into it, right? And just to sort of connect the dots for people. And so that was, almost 7 years ago now. So that was, I guess, the real beginning of who I am today, I guess.
And so, no, that's all good. This is very interesting to me. So really, the Dear Winnipeg stuff started in 2018. And did you... Okay, just a slight aside and nerd little bit here. Yeah. Is it just like a Squarespace or WordPress backend, or?
Yeah, it's a WordPress backend that I self-host, and it's. I was really at the time I debated starting a YouTube channel, but as you saw when we started this interview, my laptop is not up to snuff. I didn't have any of the equipment, but I'm like, you know what? I can write stuff on a blog pretty easily. It's simple layout and no ads, no just the straight goods. Not doing it to earn income, just doing it as a public service to my co-Winnipeggers. It really surprisingly kind of took off from there. I was really I was happy that it did. What surprised me was the amount of people from outside Winnipeg that would be interested, to the point that like nowadays probably 60 or even 65% of the people who read are not from Winnipeg. They're from other Canadian cities or cities in the US, because the stuff I write about is kind of universal in North America, right? All of our cities have made the same kind of mistakes for decades and decades. And so when I'm writing about Winnipeg, people are reading that, but they're like, oh yeah, this is my city too. It's
exactly
been cool.
Yeah, it's applicable to cities everywhere.
Yeah. So it's been super cool to connect with people from kind of all over. And so that's been really neat. And then, from that, as that has grown, again, I was kind of naive at the beginning, right? When I first started, I'm like, I'm going to, buy my domain for 2 years, right? Because I'm like, I'm going to say everything I need to say in 1 year, and then I'll leave it up for posterity for another year. Then I'll be all done, right? And here we go. 7 years later, still writing. But no, it's cool. And then, last summer, an opportunity, I was approached to write a book on municipal finance. And so that's coming out in May. So really psyched about that. But I took the approach.
And what's that called?
It's called You'll Pay for This. how we can afford a great city for everyone forever. So yeah, again, it is the same vibe as the blog, where Winnipeg is kind of like the case study, but it is applicable everywhere, and it is addressed to everybody, not just Winnipeggers. It is meant for anybody who wants their city to be great and affordable and to keep doing it forever. But yeah, and like I said, starting out, I knew right away if I'm going to start writing about infrastructure and municipal finance, like I said, people's eyes tend to glaze over right away. So I right away, adopted a kind of tone and format that is like more fun. Use a lot of jokes, a lot of humor. I'm inspired a lot by like Bill Nye the Science Guy or like the Daily Show kind of stuff, where you're learning things, but it's in a fun kind of jokey kind of atmosphere. So that's kind of what I tend to try to stick to, just to keep it interesting, even if you're already interested in the topic. But if you're not interested in the topic, maybe you'll stick around and learn a thing or two. So yeah, that's been sort of my trajectory, my journey, whatever you call that.
I really liked that walkthrough. Wow, it's almost like you might have maybe told someone that before.
I might have. Thought about this. I know people ask, and that's the story. But yeah, so anyways,
it's a good one.
Happy ending to the Portage and Maine story. It will be open at the end of June to pedestrians for the first time in 46 years. It's not all good news. We didn't do it because we saw the light. We have done it because the waterproof membrane that keeps the rain out of the underground tunnels needs replacing, and the city doesn't have the money to replace it. So it's just cheaper to let people cross the street. So
yeah, I guess
municipal finance to the rescue, right? Yeah.
That's funny. So even though this is not your career and you're not a city planner, etc., were you approached at any point because you'd brought this up and you put yourself out there as saying, hey, I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to speak about this and educate people? Have you been approached by the city you mentioned like speaking events before? Yes, or
so I'm always in contact with council members, and they're always happy to chat. I've also, talked with some people in the administration as well. The city of Winnipeg, like City of Winnipeg Incorporated, like the corporation of the city of Winnipeg, is a big organization, right? The city is 800,000 residents. The city of Winnipeg has 10,000 employees. So it's a very big organization, and making change in that size of organization is slow, right? And the best place to start is locally. And so a lot of the stuff that I focus on just in my own city is at the neighborhood level, right? I'm involved in our neighborhood association, and, we do a lot of projects locally in our neighborhood because we know that filters up eventually, but also we know that it creates precedents for other neighborhoods to copy as well. And so it helps, it just helps to get the change that we need done. But because when a single councillor represents 50,000 residents, it's hard to convince them to act a certain way unless a certain percentage of their constituents want them to, right? And so it's hard to convince somebody of something when their job depends on them not being convinced, right? So that's the idea
saying,
why,
yes.
Yeah. Yep. So that's the idea why, in Winnipeg anyways, that, city council is not the lowest, closest to the bottom in the sort of bottom up action that you need to do to make change. So yeah, I don't even remember what the question was.
Okay. So actually going off of that though, I'll follow up with another one, but we can move on to the next section of how you get around. But first, when you're dealing with counselors and trying to convince, out of the 50,000 people, you are just one person. Okay, so out of all the constituents, your voice should be equal, except for when you bring up finances. Like if the counselors don't necessarily understand, like, hey, so yeah, we have to do some penny pinching, or we have to reduce some services, or get rid of a community center, etc. It's like, hey, could we not and instead do X, Y, Z, ABC? And I've covered this extensively in this, maybe do some reading. Like, does that have a bit more pull than just, hey, I want a better sidewalk here or a
And
bike
so
lane here.
You got to recognize that city councilors are just normal people. Like they're just regular people like everybody who, you know, they're former school teachers, former pastors, former construction workers, former lawyers, like just normal, regular, everyday people who decided one day that, hey, they wanted to serve their city. And so they ran for office and they won. And then, wow, now you're in charge of a multi-billion-dollar budget. Good luck. Right. You know, that's essentially what it is. And so when you think of like just normal people, whoever's listening to this podcast, whoever's, you know, trying to learn about municipal finance, they know as much as you do going in, right? Going into that job, they don't know the ins and outs any more than you do. And so they're just trying to do their best with the information that they have. So at the same time, they also have a lot of people coming at them with requests and with, you know, quote unquote help. They have to filter that out. And so it really is about a long-term sort of building relationships, right? That you're not just some crazy person who's like, hey, I think you should do this or you should do it this way. It is about, you know, building some trust and building a relationship and being helpful without being overbearing. And so, yeah, that's a long-term kind of thing. And so, yeah, I think over time, you as you build that reputation, or as you have a body of work that kind of builds up, that people are like, oh yeah, that's actually pretty interesting. And I like how you said that. You know, that just builds a level of trust or a level of recognition that like, oh yeah, maybe we should, you know, take a look at what you're saying. And so from my perspective, like I feel there's been a lot of uptake outside of my city. I mean, they always think what the saying is, you're never a prophet in your own town. So I've actually been, I've had a lot of opportunities to talk to people in other cities. And that's been really, really exciting to see people just really eager to learn about, you know, how municipal finance works. And again, people tend to be intimidated by it. I mean, just as a society, we are, I don't know, this is a little bit math averse. It kind of feels like, where people are like, oh, I'm bad at math, right? And it's you know, like a jokey way to say it. You know, municipal finance isn't all math, right? A lot of it is just concepts that you just need to understand how things work. You don't need to do the math. There's people at your city that do the math for you. You just need to know how to understand what they're telling you. And that's the main part, right? And there are just there are a couple of key concepts that anybody can learn that all of a sudden just opens it wide up for you. Like it'll just, I get it now, right? This makes more sense. You don't need to know all the details, you know, unless you are going to be working in it. And as an owner or as a co-owner, that's really what we care about, is the big picture, right? We don't necessarily need everybody to dig down into like, well, how many dollars did we spend on snow clearing? Like, yes, that's important, but as again, as an owner, what's important is, what are the long-term trends? You know, what is driving those trends? How can we either reinforce those trends if they're positive or reverse them if they're negative? Those are the major things we need to understand and where those come from and how they relate to all the other policy decisions that we're making, right? It's not like the budget decisions are one time a year and then the rest of the year we don't worry about it, right? It's all connected all the time, right? So we always have to have that in the back of our minds when we're making decisions about bike lanes or transit or street trees or sewage or you know, God forbid, road expansions, right? Like, you know, we always have to have that idea in the back of our minds, you know, and we're examining, you know, development proposals and all of that. So yeah, we need to understand how cities can be financially sustainable, right? Because we said, like, they provide all of these services that touch our daily lives, and they need to be able to do it, not just today, not just tomorrow, but every day, forever, right? We don't ever want there to be a day where the city cannot afford to provide clean drinking water. Like that's a non-starter. We have to be able to do that. So So that's why it's important.
Yeah, there's a baseline of service that you don't want to go under. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, exactly. And not only a baseline, but like you want to be able to grow as your city prospers, right? You have a baseline, and then as your city does well, you want to be able to add to that baseline, right? You want to be able to say like, okay, now we want a pool, and now we want this, and now we want to, just the baseline is not what we're aiming for in a livable city, right? In a livable, thriving city.
Okay, so with all of that said, now a little bit more about you, because I am curious. So on the entrepreneurship side of things, do you want to share what you do in particular? Or
Sure. Yeah,
I'm curious. I'm like, okay.
I have a consulting company that I do work for film and television productions. I do music rights clearances. So essentially, when TV or film production needs to use music in the background or whatever, they need to clear the rights to that. So they hire me to sort of figure out who owns the songs and negotiate the rights for them. So that's the kind of work that I do.
Interesting, because I was going to then ask if you're able to do your daily life without, let's say, having to drive around, because it could have been the trades work, etc. You're like, well, I am all for all of the improvements. However, I need to drive my trades truck around with a trailer hauling all this stuff, which is totally fine. That's not everyone, though. In your case,
precisely,
might
it's
not
not
be
everyone.
the case. So.
And in my case, it's not the case. In my case, it's my own business, and it's mostly phone calls and emails. So something I can do from anywhere, and so I do it from home mostly. So I don't have a commute. So my daily routine doesn't involve going to an office, or it does, but the office is directly connected to my kitchen, so it's not a very long commute.
Have you considered adding roundabouts to your home?
That's right. And the living room, just so the kids can all get around. Yeah, absolutely. We have talked about it. We did do the finance calculations on there. We don't think the return is quite there. No, I'm just kidding. No.
So instead, you just put a pillow on the ground, or
that's right.
That's the temporary roundabout.
Yeah. No, it's good. So I don't own a vehicle anymore. All my life, I did own one. All my adult life, anyways. Bought a car as soon as I was 18, basically, and then I owned one consecutively all the way up until 2018, which was a year after we had our third child. And it came out of we live in a neighborhood. It's kind of an inner city, downtown adjacent neighborhood, older neighborhood. It's got streetcar neighborhood essentially. And so it has a lot going for it. It is seen its better days, but we love it. The people are amazing. The services, there's a lot of services available within walking distance. And so, what we found ourselves is, and again, I work from home, my wife works from home. And so we found that, at a certain point, our car just wasn't getting driven enough. Like we still needed one. My sister doesn't live inside the city. So, getting to see my sister, we have to drive. So there's always there are certain trips that a car is ideal for, right? It's just
for sure,
not every trip requires a car, and you should use the right tool for the job. Same as not every home repair should be done with a hammer. A hammer is perfect for certain things that you want a hammer for that, but for other stuff, like maybe you need a different tool. Like you don't want to be like, hey honey, the toilet's clogged again, better get the hammer, right? That's going to cost more money than you're saving. Basically we got to a point where our car just didn't seem to get driven quite a bit enough. So we brought for an oil change, and some of the seals were drying out, and they're like, you really need to drive your car more, or maybe you reconsider owning a vehicle. And so
we recently did that in the fall. We got our car tuned up, and he's like, hey, so full brake repair or swapping out everything because your rotors are rotted and you don't drive enough. And how the heck don't you drive more than once per week?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I'm like, okay, can we do maybe once per 2 weeks? And he's like, no, 2 times per week. Or sorry, he was 3 times per week. I'm like, okay, that's asking a lot. How about 2? Maybe 1? He's like,
yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right?
It's like bartering.
Yeah, like exactly. And so it took us a while that we like to really like, you live in a car dependent city. It took us a while to really like get a grasp of that and be like, okay, we're selling the car. But it took us several months to like decide to do it. And what got us to decide finally was like, hey, wait a minute, if we sell it and it is a complete gong show, we could just buy another car. And we're like, oh yeah, okay. So we started kind of as a trial, right? We'll sell the car, we'll see how that goes. And so, yeah, I mean, again, we're lucky that where we live and how we work, that there are a lot of options available to us. And that's really the key to it is you want your city to be able to provide options so that people can choose, right? And so, yeah, our kids take piano lessons in the neighborhood. The kids, there's a curling club in the neighborhood. They, like all of the kids, most of our kids' activities are all in the neighborhood, stuff they can walk to, stuff we can walk to. So that's super helpful. We also found that now that our kids are older, they all have their own activities. That's actually been kind of a lifesaver. The fact that they can walk to their own stuff, that we're not like mom and dad taxi everywhere. It has
which I see online often, where people are crazy. Like, oh, you don't understand, like that. And the moms are talking, they're like, you just become a taxi driver when they start doing anything outside of the home. It's like,
and you do,
wow,
and it's not your
that's
fault.
A systemic problem.
It is exactly, and the city should help provide more options for people to not have to do that. They can still if they want to, but they don't have to, right? Mostly because from the municipal finance perspective, it's cheaper for the city to provide more options than to just go all in on the one, car-centric design, right? And so we try to walk as many places as we can. We have bikes. We bike for those medium distances, transit whenever possible, and of course there's a car sharing co-op in Winnipeg. So we are members of that. So for the trips that do require a car, which there are some, like I said, my sister doesn't my sister doesn't live in the city, so right away, anytime we go see my sister, we need a car. There's no way to get there otherwise. And then there's sometimes, whatever, you need to pick something up at Home Depot that is unwieldy. That's fine. The car co-op has trucks and vans and whatever, right? So we can get the right vehicle.
I was going to say, you can then just adapt, get the thing that you need rather than, we have a tiny little hatchback and we can't do anything with it except for drive, which is totally fine. That's 90% of things anyways. But because you don't own a vehicle and you take your bike or transit, etc., it's like, okay, go get a pickup truck. Boom, you have it for the day.
Exactly. So you're using exactly the exact right tool for the exact right transportation job sort of every time, right? It's not been easy. It's not, again, I live in a kind of central neighborhood, so it is easier. But there's a lot of places in Winnipeg where what we do, it would not be possible. It would be impossible. And because people don't have the options, right? And unfortunately, to bring it back to municipal finance, that is insanely expensive for the city to provide. Car infrastructure is so expensive. We cannot afford, and no city can afford, to provide that as the only option for all of its citizens. It is just too expensive, and it doesn't create enough taxable value.
How are you feeling about all of the expansions on the, how many lanes are we at with the Texas and what is it Austin? Oh my goodness, they're just destroying neighborhoods and
Katy
businesses.
Freeway, which is at 18 lanes wide. Yeah, it doesn't solve the problem, because the issue is not we don't want to move. You're not trying to move cars, you're trying to move people, you're trying to move goods, right? And there are more efficient ways to do that. And again, if we had unlimited money, great, cool, let's do it. Everybody in a car, awesome.
50 lanes.
Yeah, 50 lanes, cool.
Each way.
Cool. But, and again, it's important to say, we're not, it's not, we need to provide access for cars. There needs to be because there's, again, some types of transportation trips, that is absolutely the best tool. And so that needs to be an option, but it needs to be one of many options, right? Because that's the thing, is that, providing cycling as an option, providing transit as an option, providing walking as an option, all of those things are orders of magnitude less expensive than providing the driving option, right? And so essentially those are the options that pay for the driving option, which we also, again, want to keep, right? But we need to make sure that the other ones are actual real options for people, that they're going to be reliable, they're going to be safe, they're going to be comfortable. Those need to be provided so that, you know, as many people as possible can choose those, so that, you know, for the other trips, for the other people, that the driving can be sustainable, right? We can continue to provide that as an option.
That's the big thing I always try to say is, I'm not anti-car, as you're saying. Like, there's a lot of things that we need vehicles for. That's great. But it's not as much as we are emphasizing and dedicating 100%, 99% of our infrastructure to.
And especially
by taking people out of cars.
And again, when you look at it from the financial standpoint, like, that's super obvious, right? And again, it's the long-term trends that we're looking at, right? It's easy to look in a single year and be like, oh, look, we found the money to build this, ta-da, and look, we got a little bit of economic growth. Awesome. But over the long term, was that enough economic growth? Did we get enough, you know, land development to provide, you know, the taxable revenue that is going to not only maintain this, but eventually replace it? And then, you know, ideally have some left over so that we can pay for other stuff that makes our city better, like parks, like pools, like arenas, like, you know, all the nice stuff that we want to have, public art, or, you know, whatever, the stuff that makes it a nice place to live. That needs to be paid for too. And it needs to be paid for out of sort of economic growth, which, you know, there's a certain,
not just sprawling and population growth.
Well, and that's the thing, is we've sort of passed the amount of economic growth that will pay for itself with, you know, a new road. At this point, there's just, it's so not even close. Like in Canada, there's some estimates that the infrastructure deficit for municipalities, which is the amount of money that municipalities, all the cities throughout Canada, will need over the next 10 years to maintain their infrastructure, that they don't have, right? So there's all the money they have that they're planning on spending in the next 10 years. Well, then all the extra money that they need that they don't have, has been estimated to be almost $1 trillion by some measures. $1 trillion. Like, we'd have to, like, that's an amount of money. Like, it's not just the city, it's not just the province. It's like the federal government doesn't have $1 trillion to spend over 10 years. Like, that's a crazy amount. We'd have to double our national debt to get that amount of money. And then that's just 10 years. What do we do in year 11, 12, 13? Like, and then,
is this all like the municipalities' budgets combined, or is that more at the federal? That's municipal.
So this is everything that municipalities are responsible for on the infrastructure standpoint. Like, that is just a crazy amount of money. It's never going to happen. We are, and the fact that about 85-90% of all of that infrastructure is just roads and pipes. Like, it's just like the things that connect all the buildings for, like, roads and toilets. Like, that's it is really how we've built our city, right? If we built in a more compact thing, we would need a lot fewer roads, a lot fewer pipes, narrower, shorter, and it would have the biggest impact on our infrastructure deficits, right? Like in Winnipeg, I think it's 88% is roads and pipes. 12% is everything else: pools, civic buildings, fire trucks, laptop computers, like, just everything. Parks, like, just like swing sets, like, just everything that isn't roads and pipes. That's 12%, right? We could close every pool, every library, everything, and it would have a 12% impact. But we can, you know, intensify development where there's already roads and pipes. We can, you know, try to move more people in the same amount of space with bike lanes, with transit, with wider sidewalks. And then that's going to have a much bigger impact. It's because it is how we've developed our cities, right?
Just dying over here for a second.
Yeah, I heard. I'm like, oh no.
I'll be able to use your take. I'll take a moment here.
Yeah.
I tried to breathe my tea.
Yeah,
don't do that.
Don't. 0 out of 10. Do not recommend.
Would not recommend. Do not do. But no, so, like, I was going to ask earlier about Like, what are some of the key concepts when you mentioned just knowing the key concepts? You don't necessarily need to know all the dollar figures and like the pennies. Where do they all go? It's like, no, just these key concepts, the running these roads and underneath the piping and electricity and everything else that goes along with them. The fewer people that you're servicing along those stems, we'll call them, or when they branch out, if they branch out too far, you're going to have a really big problem that's unsustainable. And that's kind of what we're running into at this point, correct?
Yeah, it's 100%, right? Like, I mean, cities in Canada, also in the US mostly, but for sure in Canada, all of the cities, and in the US, a lot of cities or most cities, they're required to balance their budget every year, right? Which means they can't spend more than they have. The one exception to that is infrastructure, right? They're allowed to borrow money for infrastructure. They don't need to have the cash on hand for it. And that's the problem there is because infrastructure is like this long-term thing, right? When you're paying a librarian, you pay them and then that's it, right? You don't need to pay them again unless they work more hours, right? But with infrastructure, it's something like these are things that last like 20, 30, 50, 100 years, right? And so they have costs going for 20, 30, 50, 100 years. And then once that 100 years or 50 years is up, then the city's also on the hook for replacing it, right? So if you build a road, you have to maintain it for 50 years. At the end of 50 years, then you also have to pay again to replace it. So it's this ongoing expense that we aren't keeping track of. How much of this can we afford on the tax base that we have, right? We need to compare how much money we can bring in versus how much money that infrastructure is going to cost us every year for ever, right? And that's the part that we haven't been calculating as cities, right? Because we've been focused on this year's budget, balance this year's budget without looking at how that, long-term effect is. And so we've essentially built over, 80 years, we've built cities that require so much more pipe, so much more road per person, that it's now beyond any measure, right, that we're able to afford. And that's the thing. When people say, oh, the province or the feds have to help out the cities, they forget that the feds and the province get their money in the same place as the city does from us, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the problem is not that the province doesn't have the money or the feds don't have the money. The problem is we don't have the money, right? Like, it doesn't matter who collects it, and it doesn't matter if it's a property tax, an income tax, a sales tax, a user fee. It doesn't matter how it comes. It has to come from our economy. And if our economy isn't large enough to have the taxation capacity, getting like into details here, but like, if we haven't created enough wealth as a community to pay for this infrastructure, then it's just gonna get abandoned. And that's what we're seeing in our cities, right? Our cities aren't keeping up with their maintenance obligations. And so stuff is falling apart, and community centers are closing, and pools are closing, roads are potholed, and anybody, if this was happening in their own house, would understand that it's not time to like add more, right?
Yeah. Don't add an extension to your home
when your roof is leaking, right? If your roof is leaking, time to repair the roof. Don't add extra roof with an addition, right? Like, and so that,
we'll just not use that part of the house. Yeah. We'll just add another part of the house. Yeah, exactly. And then we'll service that.
I know. And that's the thing is it's obvious when you talk about it that way. And, people will say, oh, cities aren't like households. Well, they are actually. Like they operate just like a nonprofit corporation would, right? And if a nonprofit corporation consistently needs to spend more than it has, it's eventually going to shut down. Even if it's a not-for-profit corporation, you can't spend more than you have.
Because municipalities are different from provincial and federal levels, correct?
Yeah, there's probably more similarities to provinces, but definitely a big difference between federal and municipal. But between municipal and like a corporation, like a business or a nonprofit or a charity, like it's basically the same, right? I like to use the example. It's a nonprofit corporation that is co-owned by all of the people who live there, right? We're all member owners of this co-op, essentially, that is our city. And it operates from a financial perspective exactly the same way, right? And so we need to be able to pay our member dues every year. because that's where that money's coming from. Whether we paid it to the province or the feds first, or we're paying it directly to the city, it doesn't matter. It's money that's coming from us. So, yeah.
So moving on to a slightly separate topic here. We're going a little bit long, but this has been incredibly informative. Actually, okay, right before we get to the other topic here, I just wanted to ask, so construction problems happen this way. So a lot of people in London, Ontario complain that once construction season, actually a lot of cities, but here in Ontario, I'm exposed to it firsthand, people complaining about construction season. And it's like, oh my goodness, can't they decide to do one road and then the other and the other and the other and not do it all at once? The problem is that it's what you're describing. It's all been delayed for so long that finally, and all our property taxes are skyrocketing like 8% this year or something. And they did last year as well, because now it's like, hey, actually, we have a problem. We're running out of money. Everything you said is happening here in London, and it's happening within the last few years, because now there was a mayor previously that was like, hey, 0 property tax. That's a great idea, right?
Yeah.
Horrible. So
we had the same thing in Winnipeg for 14 straight years. So yeah.
Ooh,
yeah.
Wow.
In the early 2000s anyways. Yeah. We had 14 straight years of tax freezes, consecutive tax freezes. Now, I mean, it's important to understand that like that obviously didn't help, but it's not the cause of the issues, right? Because your budget still got balanced every year, right? Your city just cut services instead of raising taxes. And so, it didn't help, but had they raised taxes, they wouldn't have raised taxes and cut services. They would have just raised taxes. And so you just have fewer services than you did before the 0% tax increases. And this is like, again, a systemic long-term thing. It's been happening since like World War II, essentially. There is no one mayor or one council that is to blame, where, it's just been, decades of following the same pattern, right? Nevertheless, we're here now, right? Yeah, exactly. And we have to deal with it. And so, yeah, it sucks, but that's what it is. And we can start to do things better, right? Yeah. Sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, no, it's all good. So I was just saying that it's all happening at once, all the construction. And it's like, yeah, because it needs to. The roads are in disrepair. I would say they're pretty good, to be honest. We went to Costa Rica. Those roads, very in disrepair. Slightly different. Yeah. But yeah, it's all happening at once. And they're doing it as fast as they can. And then because we have built everything, again, just like what you're saying, everything is mostly designed for personal vehicles. So then when that is the only option and everyone is driving, then when the roads are shut down at crucial places, everyone then funnels into the only other few roads ways to get to other parts of the city.
Because they're not given other options, they end up going where you don't want them to go, where they don't want to go, right? And so that's basically what it is. And yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of deferring maintenance, right? There's a lot of stuff that wouldn't need a huge reconstruction if we had just done the small maintenance. But we didn't do the small maintenance because we couldn't afford the small maintenance. And so now, it piles up, and you get to a point where, now we're just borrowing huge sums of money to do maintenance work. And as long as, like you said, as long as the city's still able to borrow more money, well, then they can maybe kind of keep their roads looking okay compared to Costa Rica. But, that's maybe not the bar we need to set for ourselves. But, I just took a quick peek at fake London's financials before this, because I'm that kind of guy. And yeah, your infrastructure ratio, your net book to cost of infrastructure is falling. Right. So that's a ratio that tells you whether you're keeping up with how fast your infrastructure is depreciating. So if this is falling down, if this is going down, it tells you that you're probably deferring maintenance. You're not keeping up with what you have built. And so in 2017, that ratio is about 65%. So basically saying that your infrastructure has 65% of its life remaining. And then in 2023, it's down to 63%. Right. So over 6 or 7 years, it's just going down. And I'd be interested to see the longer term trends. Like I know in Winnipeg, that's also the same thing. We're just on a downward trend. Over the past 25 years I've looked at, and it's just, we're not maintaining what we own. Despite city council trumpeting every year, like we're spending record amounts, like, yeah, I know, but you need to ask how much would you need to actually maintain what we had? And that number would be shocking to most people. That number would be like, that's just an impossible number. And once you wrap your brain around that, then you can be like, okay, you can kind of like they say, we're out of money, time to start thinking, right? Like that's really what you can hope for. Because right now, I think there's a lot of people that don't understand it and don't understand how deep our cities are in the hole financially. And so there's a lot of kind of what is essentially denial. Like, yeah, things are tight, but they're not that bad. No, they are that bad. And not every city is in the same spot, but yeah, it's bad and getting worse in almost every place, right? So the sooner we can reckon with that, the sooner we can, see that is the case, the sooner we can start making different decisions to reverse that, right? And again, it doesn't, like the solution doesn't lie in multi-billion-dollar road expansions, right? We don't have multiple billions of dollars or multiple hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever. We don't have that money as cities. We just don't. It's going to be borrowed. It's going to be whether the city borrows it or whether the province or the feds are borrowing it for us. It's borrowed money that somebody needs to pay interest on, and it's going to be us. And if, the economic growth that is promised out of it isn't there, not only can we not pay the interest, we can't pay the maintenance, we can't pay we need profit left over so that we can pay for pools and libraries. That's not there. And so we need to like get serious about that and look at what are the projects that are going to give us this return on investment. And they're the cheap ones. They're the slowing traffic wherever we have people we want to have walking. They are planting street trees. They are widening sidewalks. They are, adding bike lanes. These are like relatively, like they cost peanuts compared to, the traditional road expansion. And so two things is, one, because it costs so little, the returns are insane. They're so high because it's such a cheap cost. But the other thing too is, if we build something and it doesn't have the returns that we were hoping for, well, it was cheap. No big loss, right? As opposed to, you spend $500 million or $1 billion on a road expansion. If it doesn't return what you were hoping for, that is a big mistake, right? That's what we call a boondoggle, right? Like that word exists for a reason. It's from like massive investments into these really risky, massive mega projects that never seem to pan out. Those are boondoggles. You've never heard of there is no such thing as like a $1,000 boondoggle, right? Like that's not a thing, but you can plant a tree for $1,000, you probably plant a couple of trees for $1,000, right? So that's the kind of stuff we need to focus on. And then of course, like changing our zoning bylaws to allow the kind of small scale development that can fill in where we already have infrastructure investments, where we already have streets, where we already have pipes. We need to have more homes there. We need to allow more businesses so that people can choose to walk to the store or piano practice or whatever, so that there's opportunities within walking distance.
I've been kind of like starting some new scripts for videos that are more finance related, but health and wealth, because what you're describing there as well is not only, hey, like you can save some money and walk. It's like, okay, like blah, blah, blah. Like there's the cost of driving a kilometer or a mile is actually way higher than most people think it is. They just think of it as, I have to fill up the tank a little bit sooner. But it's actually way more than that.
If the tax man allows you to deduct, I think it's like 65 cents a kilometer or 70 cents a kilometer.
73 in Canada.
73 cents a kilometer. There is no chance that it costs less than that.
Exactly, right? If the government is saying that,
the government is their job to collect taxes from you. They're not giving you a freebie being like, 73 cents. Yeah. And that's reality. It's like a lot of owning and operating a car is about I think they say about $15,000 a year. And then the average person,
and people are like, no, it can't be.
And the average person puts about 15,000 kilometers a year on their car. So that means $1 a kilometer.
And in America, it's 15,000 miles, which is 23,000 kilometers. I've just been doing the research recently, so it's fresh in mind.
So it's like $1 a kilometer. Like that's so expensive, right? And so it would be awesome to like be able to like, oh, this is a 5-kilometer trip that I don't have to take, or a 2-kilometer trip. Hey, I just saved $5. Awesome, right? Like that's amazing.
And the thing what I wanted to bring up is it's also healthy. So everyone sits in a car. I realize Winnipeg gets very, very cold. One, you can probably dress for it because
that's thing. There's no bad weather, just the wrong clothes.
Exactly. Yeah. But even still, you get exercise.
And again, they talk about like, oh, Winnipeg's minus 40. Yeah, it gets minus 40 maybe a handful of times. Like really, like most of the time, it's totally fine. And yeah, so for that handful of times, fine, take your car, or take the bus, or don't go, or like whatever. Like again, it's about having. The other thing having options.
I don't think I've ever covered. It's like some people say that yes, there's a few weeks that are cold. So yes, you can take a cab, you can do the bus, you can do a few things, dress appropriately. Maybe you don't bike in -40, or maybe you do because it's really short. Again, with density. But the interesting thing there is, one, it's healthier to get out. But two, if you need to do grocery shopping and you look at, we have the weather network, right? Like we have the weather forecast. You can check if next week's going to be really warm, go out and do like your shopping the next week, like the week before, and then bunker down. And then, yes, if you do, for you guys, you get to stay home and work from home and hunker down for a whole week. That's fine. Some people will say, oh, I have to commute. Also fine. Yeah. You can figure that out, but you can still prep to do.
I think part of it is that people, if you live in a car dependent area where you have to take your car for everything, you understandably get into kind of an all or nothing kind of thinking where you're like, I drive everywhere, but I can't take the bus everywhere, or I can't bike everywhere. And that's sort of the thing that is, it's understandable that people see it that way because that's how you are experiencing it. But yeah, the idea is not that you switch from driving everywhere to walking everywhere. The idea is that you have a suite of options that sometimes you walk, sometimes you bike, sometimes you take the bus, sometimes you still drive, right? Sometimes. And so that's the idea, is that it becomes a bunch of options. You end up saving a lot of money personally, from not driving as much. It is actually like shocking how much money you save. Personally. Yeah. But again, it's so important to recognize
these sunk costs, but
some of it, but yeah,
like insurance, etc.
Yeah, but you have to, but even aside from the sunk costs, like every kilometer, you're still, even if $1 a kilometer is your average, and even if 40 cents of that is sunk, like 60 cents is still a lot of money that you save pretty quickly. But yeah, regardless of that, like no matter how expensive that is, that you can't forget that that's like hugely subsidized, on the public side, right? From city expenses, right? We're subsidizing that with all of the debt that our cities are taking on, and provinces and feds are taking on debt to give money to our cities. We're subsidizing it. Our kids are subsidizing it. Essentially, our grandkids are going to be subsidizing because they're going to be paying for that long after we're gone. And so, so no matter beside the fact of how expensive driving is, that's the subsidized cost, right? And again, it's not an argument to get rid of driving. It's an argument to be like, we need to give people more viable options so that we're saving money personally, so that people can live better lives, not wasting all of their money just getting places, and B, so that our cities can be thriving, beautiful, lovely places to live in that are sustainable forever. That's the goal here, right? And so, yeah, I mean that's how it all kind of ties together.
We were emailing back and forth before this recording, and we were talking about how everything is connected. It all links back down to finance, of like municipal finances. I did want to bring up one thing about the MTO, so Ministry of Transportation of Ontario here. You were mentioning like debt and paying interest on debt and everything. And municipal, it's very important because that's run slightly differently from provincial and federal. But oh my goodness, I don't know if you've taken a look at the massive debt of the MTO. You may not want to, so that you can sleep at night. Yeah, but it's a growing concern, especially because they're continuing to expand, and it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And they're like, hey, our one job as MTO is to, I mean, there's more jobs, but it seems like they see their job as, hey, let's make more like highways and roads. And it's like, okay, but wait, what? Stop, please stop. And they're like, no, we can do it. We'll pay for it. Like in the case of a recent St. Thomas video that's over on the Strong Towns video. In Canada, that highway, Highway 3 is not municipal. It's taken on by the provincial government. And yet it's not needed. And it's like, yeah, we want to do this job. We'll do it. We promised some big companies that we would do it. We'll do it. But it's like the money still comes from one source, even at a provincial level or federal level, municipal level. And as you were saying, it's us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And even if we're paying it to businesses who are then paying taxes, right? Ultimately, it's our money, right? And the amount of money that this system that we've built needs to exist is just beyond anything that beyond our imagination, right? And so we can't afford an extra foot of road or pipe really in almost every city, right? We have to focus on making better use of what we have already built, because we can't forget that like when we take on debt, that debt needs to be paid back, right? So we maybe take on debt and we build a new road or we build whatever it is, that comes with an obligation to pay that back. And let's say it's like over 20 years or 30 years, that those dollars that we use to pay back that debt, not just the interest, but also the principal on it, that those dollars have to come from somewhere. And generally those come from, operating dollars that we can't spend on something else, right? So when we take on a debt, we are promising to find that money in our operating budget, right? So that's a promise to either increase taxes or cut services, right? There is a third option where maybe you can grow your tax base, but we've been trying for 80 years and we still haven't caught up. So maybe our investments are not as profitable as we think they are. And that is the problem, right? That is the problem right there. And so we have to look back to these profitable investments, the ones that have the big return on investment that are low risk, right? We have no money as cities. We don't have money. Like the money is not there. We can't afford to take a mortgage out on our house and go all bet it on red at the casino, right? Like that's just not how you should be doing things. When you have no money. When you have no money, you rub your pennies together and you slowly build on low risk investments and high return that way. But that's not the approach we've been taking so far.
Yeah. So I guess we have covered, I have on my notes here, the bad, the ugly, we've covered that. So wrapping up with maybe some good or solutions like that anyone listening or me, you, what can we do about this? Like what are some solutions? Because it's a slow process. Things will not change immediately. That's impossible. And that's fine. That's how the world works. But what are some things that we can do that are slowly working in the right direction as citizens who are the only ones paying for all of these things?
Yeah. Well, we got to remember, it took 80 years for our cities to get to this point. So like you said, it's not something we can, wave a magic wand and fix overnight. But we do have to do something, right? Things will probably get worse before they get better even, because there's a lot of these long-term decisions that were made 20, 30 years ago that haven't worked their way through the system yet, right? And so, there's a lot that we can do. And essentially, we have to start small with what we have. So, get involved in your neighborhood association, do tactical urbanism projects to slow traffic in your neighborhood. Go speak at council on zoning matters. Talk to your counselor. Run for council. The reality is there's no thing that's too small to do, right? If the thing that you think you can do is writing a letter, write a letter. If the thing you think you can do is to appear at council, do that. If you think you can organize street, a garbage pickup in your neighborhood, right? A neighborhood cleanup, that kind of stuff. Whatever you think you can take on, do it. We have to do the little things that are going to all add up to big things. And once we do that, and even if you made your neighborhood 1% better this year, and if you do it again next year, 1%, 1%, before too long, you're 10% better, and that's noticeable, right? That I think is the key, is to know that as a co-owner, you can't opt out of being responsible, right? It's all of our jobs to make things better, and so do whatever is in your skill set, do whatever is in your interest wheelhouse, and start somewhere. And like I said, I started nowhere and eventually got to this. You'll find that as you do stuff, you'll learn as you go along. You'll find what interests you. You'll find what you are passionate about. You'll find what you're successful at, and you'll inspire other people to do the same thing. And before you know it, you and your neighbors will be building a fake London that is better than the real London.
Hey, it's funny because we have a lot of advantages here in our fake London of London, Canada, compared to London, England. And obviously, some channels disparage us. However, we have a lot of good things going on.
100%.
And we even have the size. Like, I still can't believe that. I believe it's 16 by 20. That's like the urban growth boundary for 16 kilometers wide by 20, whatever, 16 by 20 kilometers. That's pretty bikeable. It should be serviceable by transit. Should.
100%.
It is
Yeah.
not exactly the most right now, but don't worry. We're
Any
considering
size.
a ring road that will...
Any size can be serviced by transit. In reality, any size can be serviced by transit. And yeah, I mean, again, you don't need to be able to bike your entire city, right? Even if your city was a lot bigger, the right tool for the right job, right? That's what it comes down to. But yeah, it is. I think it's important that the people who live in a place, they're the ones who are invested in it. What the advantages your city has. What's special about it. And so, nobody's coming to save you, so you better do it.
And I think you were saying, hey, no matter what you do, nothing's too small. And you could even make a website.
You could make a
Dear
website.
Winnipeg.
You could Dear London. It would be awesome, right? Or Dear wherever city you are. I think there's Decorah, Iowa. There's a Dear Decorah now, which is awesome. I'm just plugging that right now. Just plugging Steve. Hey, Steve, if you're listening to this. But I think exactly. Like you can do whatever it is you think you can do it. Just get out there and do it. And if it's hard or if it's, break it up into smaller steps, right? Sometimes you feel that you're not making any progress. Sometimes it's just that you're taking too big a bite. So try to break it down to smaller steps, and then you'll make more progress more quickly, but also it won't burn you out as much because it is always more fun to win than to lose. And so, I have a lot of respect for people who will work hard at a big project and take 6 years to get to fruition. I have a lot of respect for those people, but that I just can't. I need to have some feedback that lets me know that I'm having an impact. And so, smaller scale projects, or if you're taking a big project, make it into smaller steps so that you can feel that you're making progress. And
that's
also
even one of Strongtown's values, the ground up, slower incrementalism rather than massive projects.
And again, it also lowers the risk, right? Because no matter how well-intentioned you are, you don't know for sure that what you're proposing is going to be beneficial or as beneficial as you think it is. So it's always better to have smaller steps so that you get immediate feedback. Is if it's if you're heading in the wrong direction, you can readjust a lot more quickly than if you are doing a big one big project and then oops, it's the wrong one. Like I always bring the example of sort of the way Winnipeg approaches bike lanes. They'll have one project and they're like, we're doing this stretch of road, and then they'll do all of these consultations ahead of time for months and months and months and years, and then eventually they'll take all those consultations and they'll come up with a design that pleases nobody, right? And then they'll build that, and then now you have something that nobody likes. Where compare that to Calgary when they did their downtown bike network several years ago. They just put in overnight in city terms, overnight, a temporary complete network downtown. And then over the course of 18 months, they tweaked it and they made changes based on feedback and based on, how people were using it. And then, made over 100 changes over the 18 months to then come up with a bike network that were like, okay, this is one that everybody's satisfied with, including, businesses, including drivers, including cyclists, including that everybody was happy with, because it was temporary, because it was short term, and because they were adaptable as they went along. And then once they got that, then they made it permanent, right? And so that's a much better approach. You end up again with people that are happier, but better results, right? Better results for less money, and that's 100% what we need to be approaching sort of every project.
I like it. That I think is a great close, because I think the incrementalism, the small steps, everything you just described there is the solution pretty much.
Yep.
There's always going to be massive projects like the sewage plants and things that sometimes need upgrading, but otherwise, all of those smaller incremental growth opportunities are sitting in plain sight. We just are not taking advantage of them.
Yeah, like the big projects are going to be maintenance that we need to be doing, that we haven't been doing. The small ones are the stuff that's going to get us out of this problem, right? Those are the solution. Yeah, 100%.
Okay, well, this was really amazing to have your opinions on everything.
Oh, cool,
and
man.
You've obviously been plugging away at this for 7 years now.
Yeah.
One small thing at a time, and you kept on growing your knowledge, and then you're sharing it on dearwinnipeg.com, and you have a book coming out. Did you want to go ahead and plug that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's called You'll Pay for This. It'll be out May 20th in Canada, June 24th in the US and the rest of the world. It's
on which platforms?
Everywhere you buy books. If you have a local bookstore that you like to support, I highly recommend that. They should be able to get it in, but otherwise it's on all the majors as well. Support your local bookstore, support your library. If you don't have the money to buy the book, that's fine. Go to your library and ask them to order it in. That's always good too. Yep. Supports your library, supports and gets the knowledge out there so that somebody else could read it later. So 100%. So
And if you didn't know about this, if you go to the library, I know in London, you actually can submit a form online. You submit the author, the title, and you say, hey, can you get this? And then they go ahead and they
will order it.
I don't think that's,
they will order it, and then you can read it. And once you're done, then 100 other people can read it, right? And so that's I think is also a good way to get knowledge out there. But this is, I promise you, it'll be the most fun you ever have learning about municipal finance. And I know that's a low bar, but it's written in, I hope, a way that is entertaining and fun and funny. So I invite everybody,
because I might put it in the background of my videos.
Yeah, absolutely. Pre-orders are on now, and pre-orders are very helpful. So please go ahead and pre-order it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Sounds great. So along with the book and Dear Winnipeg, are there other places that people can find you online?
Yeah, I do tend to pop up in a couple of other places, but those are the main places. I am doing a little bit of a book tour as well. So if you want me to come to your city, let me know. I'll be in a couple of different places. I'll be at the Strong Towns National Gathering in Providence as well. And I'm also speaking to the Manitoba Municipal Administrators Association. Those are the main places. Feel free to email me through my blog if you like. I answer every email, even if it does take me a while sometimes. But happy to hear from everybody.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for taking the time.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for having me. This has been great.
All right. Well, thank you very much for listening to our yammering audience. So if you liked this, you might want to check out all of the other content on my channel, but don't forget to check out dearwinnipeg.com. And don't forget to rate the podcast, the Wheels and Beyond podcast, over on everything else like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, except for YouTube, where if you're listening or watching over here on YouTube, you can go ahead, like, subscribe, and let us know what your thoughts are in the comments. You can do that on the other podcast, things like Spotify as well. And if you're interested in getting early access to videos, behind the scenes content, and more, head on over to my Patreon. Well, see you in the next one. Bye. Thanks again.